So here we are, walking down the nave, pews on either side. In the Middle Ages, really up until 17th century, there wouldn't be pews. You just stood for the service. If you were feeling weak, there would be a wooden bench along the side here, which is why we have this phrase, the weak go to the wall, because if you were feeling weak and the service had gone on too long, you went and sat there. Now we come through this arch. Now this arch represents the gateway out of Jerusalem, because every church is also a miniature version of the holy city of Jerusalem. So you know that wonderful phrase, green hill far away beyond the city wall. Here's the city wall. This is the city of Jerusalem. And in bigger churches, you have all kinds of walks around it. So now we're coming out and we're going up. This is also interesting. We're walking at this level, then we come into the chancel, and then we come to the sanctuary, and the sanctuary rises up. Why? Because what we know is that Christ was crucified on a hill outside Jerusalem. We've just walked through the city gate of Jerusalem, and this is the hill, this is Golgotha. It's a very minor one here, but in some churches it's really quite pronounced. And traditionally you would have a stained glass window, an east window here, which would depict the crucifixion. And really the medieval church is asking us to come as penitents. You put Christ on that cross. You're here to confess that your sins have nailed Christ to that cross. What is interesting is that the Anglo-Saxon tradition is completely different. There's one church left, Bradford-on-Avon, about 20 miles away from here, where there is an Anglo-Saxon church that's unchanged. In the Anglo-Saxon church, you go down into communion. Here, you're coming to remember that Christ gave his body and blood for your salvation because you put him on the cross, your sins put him there. In the Anglo-Saxon tradition, you follow your warrior king into battle against death, and you go down, you go into the tomb with Christ, and you overcome death. And the altar is the celebration table. It's the feast table. And in fact, in Greek, Eucharist means the Thanksgiving feast. And then you rise with Christ again. The Anglo-Saxons, in a sense, saw us as joining in a great cosmic battle against death, led by our warrior King Christ. The Catholic tradition, and to some extent the Anglican one, is you're the person who crucified Christ. You're the person who put him on that cross. It's a very different theology, and that's why we rise up in this tradition. What we have here is what's called an altar rail. Now, traditionally, we assume this is where you kneel to take communion. You're given the bread, you're given the wine. You're in a humble position. It was an issue of great debate in the Reformation. Were you worshipping the cross, or were you kneeling before God, or what was it? But that's the tradition. Actually, this has got absolutely nothing to do with supporting the slightly wobbly laity as they wait for their bread and wine. This was put in around about 1634, and we had a very strange, very tormented, very interesting Archbishop Laud. And remember that in the Protestant Reformation, all these walls would have been painted with saints, with angels and all the rest, all gone. There would have been statues everywhere, all gone. We would have had ritual things like the piscina that we've rediscovered, which would have been beautifully decorated, all gone. All that was sort of seen as almost pagan in a way. And so the churches became very plain indeed, not painted. If you look down towards where the font is, that would have been an enormous painting of St. Christopher. Because whenever you came in, you would have travelled, and St. Christopher was the saint of travellers and of good fortune and of protecting you. All gone, plain, dull, boring, basically. And Archbishop Laud said, no, we're dealing with the sacred. The sacred should be beauty, it should be wonder, it should be awe, it should be wonder, it should be colour. And he said, for example, because people will bring their dogs to church. For example, we should protect the altar. This is a sacred place. Let's put a fence up so the dogs can't get at the altar. That's the origin of altar rails, is to keep the dogs out. But it was also about saying, look, this is holy. Make this special. This kind of stuff, oh, this is what Archbishop Laud wanted. The Puritans, no. All you need is a plain table. That's it. None of this decoration, none of this, all that is popery. So the Church of England has kind of kept some of it. But my favourite thing here of all is that you can literally see the impress of prayer. Because if you look, this area here, covered with a little red cloth, that stone has been there probably from around about 1200. And every day, a priest, the priest who was here, and we have all their names, would have come here and would have walked, remember there was no altar rail here, would have come and walked up in order to go and stand on the north side of the altar here, and no altar rail, just walk straight over. He would stand here and say the prayers, and then he would move around just to do the communion service here, and he would always come out. He would always be on the north side. Now remember, the priest here, in a very country area, would have been wearing big, thick hobnail boots. Muddy area. Can you see how there is actually, the stone has been worn away? That is the mark of the priest over 500 years walking up here to celebrate the communion every day on behalf of his community. Doing this to give thanks to God for God's love and God's compassion and God's generosity and wonder. And that has worn a groove in the stone. I just think that's rather marvellous. It is literally the imprint of prayer.